Ethan Musolin, the Merchant of Success, and welcome because I have an interesting guest. We met some time back. I believe it was late last year, and I found myself in the same room with this amazing lady. It was a high-end cohort of writing. High-end in the sense that it's thousands of dollars to be part of this. So we're all passionate about learning. Then discovered that we actually have a history, which I'll talk about later. She is an expert in the future of work. And given that I've been in the space of the corporate space since 2002, that should give you an idea of how long I've been in this. I was like, what a gift that we have to engage with someone of that caliber and expertise. Karina D'Souza. I hope I've pronounced your name properly, Karina.
You did. It's Karina. Yeah, but close enough. Close enough. It's just a pronunciation. So I'm not Karen. Karina. That's the big thing that matters.
Okay. Thank you, Karina. Thank you. So, Karina, welcome. It's a pleasure to have you. I know you have a very busy schedule. So it is a pleasure to engage with you in the next few minutes that we have available. But for people who don't know you, who have never met you, who is this amazing, brilliant Karina D'Souza?
Well, I think you've painted me a lot bigger than I am. But
I think you're always very humble.
The way I like to think about it is right now I'm a futurist, and I happen to focus on the future of work. So futurists normally look at life 10, 30 years out into the future. I was very, well, I'll come into how I came in to do that a little while later, but I essentially look at what things are going to look like in the future. And right now, I'm being a parent. I also was very struck by how the nature of work is going to change. And so I was actually doing the future of money whilst my young children were making their career decisions. And as I watched what that world was going to be or how it was going to evolve, it was a world I understood. I started noticing signals about how the world would change significantly for my children. And I essentially gave up doing the future of money to embrace this much broader space called the future of work. Because it was important to me. It was important to the future of my own children and the way they were going to be navigating life. I realized at that time, so for me, this was around 2014, I realized at that time that the decisions my children were taking about what courses they were going to take for their O levels and A levels equivalent would determine what was going to happen. Meantime, my head was actually thinking 30 years out. Well, I don't know if you've done the math, but in reality, that's actually the time this child who's sitting at my table would be retiring. And when you put life in that context, you begin to understand how something that is a figment of your imagination 30, 50 years in the future can so significantly impact the life of someone who is so near and dear to you. So it became very important to me, very urgent to me, that I take the knowledge that I had and start focusing on the future of work in the way that I would understand how it was going to change the way things were, and also how it would immediately change the choices my children were making.
Wow. Yeah, go ahead.
I know that's not the proper introduction for me. I think you may have a different bio version of who I am, if that's what you want.
Yes. I'm sure it will be, of course, me, I know your background, but it will be good for people to know. It's not something that you just jumped into. You had a background. I know you had a very well-paying job in I believe, let's just start from there.
Okay, so professionally.
And what was the trigger that pushed you into the future of work?
Okay, so professionally or educationally, I grew up with a math and computing degree. I ended up having a nice long career at Morgan Stanley in their IT department on Wall Street. And that's actually where I learned scenario planning and strategic planning. And after 9/11, our family moved up to Canada, which is where I'm based now. In that space, I ended up becoming an entrepreneur. So my husband and I ended up running a franchise for many years. And when I closed that down, I started looking around for other things to do. And that's when I went back to doing future of money, which then led me into future of work. So that's kind of been my segue. And you were alluding to the fact that we both have a shared history. I grew up in Uganda. That's where I was born. So I was actually one of the I started my young life having left Uganda and having then lived in India and subsequently England, which is where my family was based and where I got my degree. And so I have this very interesting background of having been like a refugee and an immigrant child and an immigrant parent and the complexities of being like having been in corporate, but also having been an entrepreneur. And so I actually bring a huge blend of experiences that most people don't get to see. Very obviously, very, cross-generational, very cross-cultural, have lots of different continents that I've lived on and grown up
Yeah.
on. So I'm able to bring all those conversations to the table. I'm also an author and a keynote speaker on the future of work. I think we'll leave it at that because we've got a lot of ground to cover, and anyone who's interested can look up my Substack or my LinkedIn.
Fantastic. All right, and of course, Morgan and Stanley is one of the globally recognized brands. Go search them online. I know Karina may not want us to brag about that, but she just knows she's a brilliant, brilliant woman. And so but you talked about the future of money, and then like, okay, what was she planning about the future of money before jumping? So what was the future of money, and then what triggered? There must have been a turning point in your life. They're like, you know what? Let's forget about the future of money. Let me focus on the future of work. So first of all, what was the future of money that you are looking
Okay.
at? And then
So
what? Yeah.
given my background in IT, so basically I was in the IT department when the internet came in. So I've been part of the mainframe world, I've been part of the distributed world. So I understood the movements of technology, the evolution of technology, then going into the internet.
Yeah.
And so when I came into the future of money, it was literally at the point where Apple was considering launching the Apple Watch, considering Apple Pay. Like so if you look at my very, very early on blogs, those are the
Yeah.
ones you're going to see is the conversations about, oh, is this possible? Is this feasible? What does this mean for us? Like tapping with your credit card. Like these are the kinds of conversations I was exploring when I was debating future of money, which also then led me into conversations about, do we still have checks? Why do we have checks? What can we do digitally? Being there, like I was there when Ethereum was launched, for instance, so the Bitcoin conversation. So I just understood how the math and the technology were dancing together.
Yeah.
And more significantly, so this comes into the conversation about the future of work, is I was noticing how the banks around me in Canada were letting go of front client-facing people. Like, so there was one in
Yeah.
particular that laid off like 2,000 tellers, bank tellers. And
Wow.
in a world that was still very jitterish after the 2008 crisis, my instinct was,
Yeah.
oh my gosh, this is the precursor for another crash. So that is literally the signal I was watching for. I was watching for, okay, what could it mean that there's another recession on the horizon? And so I was paying attention to this fact. Notice that their stock price did not go down. It actually went up. So that got me digging further, and I realized that they'd let go of 2,000 client-facing tellers, but taken on 200 IT staff. And this was the
Mhm.
beginnings of what we now know as the banking apps, which literally is the way we do banking. Very few of us
Mhm.
walk into a bank anymore and do our day-to-day, taking cash out of the bank, putting a check in, et cetera, et cetera. All that became digitized and moved into the ether space. And so that's what got me now realizing how much technology was going to change the way work worked. And so the very nature of work, we call it the future of work, but I prefer to call it the nature of work. The nature of work has changed. And
Wow.
that was the beginning of the signal that I started following, the little thread that I started pulling and unraveling.
Cool. And when you say part of the other thing that really touched me when you talked about for my children. Now, which brings up the question. So even before we go, yeah, let's start because I don't want to miss that. So as a parent, sometimes we are looking at these universities or typical colleges and the like. What I believe that should come later. So let's talk about the future of work that professionals are not seeing. But I would really like you to later talk about how should parents prepare their children? What should we pay attention to that most likely the education institutions are not paying attention to? But for working professionals, for you as a futurist, what are you seeing that a typical professional is not seeing? What do you see in the future? Because, I mean, even during when you made the tilt from the future of money to the future of work, the things you envisioned actually happened. So there you have serious credibility. So it means there must be some things, again, that you're seeing that a typical professional is not seeing. What's that? And how do they prepare for that?
Okay. Okay. This can be a very, very long conversation. So we'll just drop little hints. There is a lot
Yes.
like, so I'll mention right now that I have a Substack. It's called tiltthefuture.substack.com. I write it
Tilt,
weekly, TILT,
tilt,
Tilt the
yeah,
Future.
tilt the
It's because people mispronounce my name constantly that I actually went with Tilt the Future.
okay now.
But in it, there will be like a lot of essays that actually talk about the future of work. And there's one in
And
particular.
talking about essays, forgive the interruption. Talking about the essays, I've read some of your essays. I'm a subscriber to tiltthefuture.substack.com. So I would encourage listeners to
Every
check
week,
the
yeah. So
yeah.
there's one in there called Mind the Gap. And that to me, like really, it's a very long, very wordy essay. A lot of my work normally isn't, but I knew I had to put this thing out. But that will actually encapsulate a lot of what I see is going on in the future. One of the first things
Yeah.
I'll actually say is being a futurist does not mean you're a forecaster. So I can't
Mhm.
forecast the future. I do not forecast the future. I'm looking at
Mhm.
what possible things could be going on. And so I'm actually much more a signal reader than I am a
Mhm.
forecaster. And what's
Mhm.
interesting about that is that I'm actually looking at the way things are happening and saying, okay, if this happens, what should I then do? And also I'm saying, how can I prevent that signal from happening? Right? So if there's an election coming up, you can have two mindsets. You can say, if this person comes into power, then what do I have to do to survive and thrive in that environment? And the other
Yeah.
question you can say is, what can I do now to prevent that person being elected? So those are two very different ways of reading signals, and I operate on both sides of those. And that's kind of
Mhm.
the way I've actually raised my children, like understanding that concept is a way of being able to dance because what you're doing is you can never really forecast. You might, I mean, Idi Amin and 9/11 are two very, very stark examples for me in my life that you can plan the perfect life and something will come out of left field and completely derail it. Most of us know that having experienced COVID, right? So, but this is a significant premise under which I live my life and I encourage my children to live theirs because you can craft
Mhm.
for that perfect environment, but you should also be
Yeah.
crafting for these unexpected interruptions.